Camelot hosts an annual tournament, of which the defending champion happens to be Prince Arthur, and knights from neighboring kingdoms have come to compete for its coveted title, worth $4.3 million in gold. Among those hoping to win the crown is Knight Valiant, a renowned warrior of his kingdom. Valiant secretly meets a goldsmith named Devlin, who gives him a shield decorated with 3 painted snakes that have been enchanted to come alive upon his command. He gets the shield, but kills Devlin to cover his tracks, then rides to Camelot.
Knight Valiant, welcome to Camelot.
On the other hand, Arthur rehearses his sword-fighting skills with his servant Merlin, ready and anxiously waiting for the big day. Since it's his first day working as Arthur's servant, Merlin finds it hard to withstand the prince's gallantry, and he falls to the ground. They finish, and Merlin returns to his chambers, all exhausted, and Gaius massages him. Merlin flexes on his magical abilities by summoning a scroll to read, but Gaius subtly hits him on the head and warns him not to be caught using magic. When Merlin laments his work as Arthur's servant, Gaius informs him that Arthur is under huge pressure in his role as the future king, and must be gallant enough to lead his people, owing to the reason for his toughness. Merlin and Morgana's servant, Gwen, becomes very close. Merlin takes Arthur's armor to her and asks her to teach him how to dress Arthur properly. Gwen happily teaches him, and Merlin is excited. He asks her how she knows so much about armor, and Gwen replies that her father is a goldsmith, and she sometimes helps him. The next day, Merlin dresses up Arthur and gets him ready for the tournament. He asks Arthur if he's nervous, and Arthur says he isn't. Merlin tries having a friendly conversation with him, but Arthur resents him. Despite Gwen's teachings, however, Merlin finishes dressing Arthur up, but forgets to give him his sword. Arthur is pissed off, and he angrily walks away. The knights arrive at the arena, and the crowd cheers them on. Uther walks in and welcomes everyone. He reminds them of the rules of the tournament, and reaffirms his promise of the grand prize to them.
The tournament begins!
The fight starts, and Arthur faces his first opponent. He bravely charges towards him while making sure to avoid every form of contact and cautiously dodges every hit from the knight. Owing to some tactics and his experience, it didn't take him long to defeat the man. Merlin is happy, likewise the king and everyone. That day, both Arthur and Valiant face other opponents and easily defeat them, making them advance to the next stage. Valiant congratulates Arthur on his victory and says to see him at the feast. Uther introduces Morgana to Valiant, who flirts with her and promises to win the tournament, so as to have the privilege of escorting her to the celebratory feast. Merlin uses magic to complete his chores for Arthur and spends the rest of his time studying from the Book of Sorcery. While collecting Arthur's armor from the knight's armory the following morning, Merlin hears a hissing sound and checks around to see where it's coming from. He notices that one of the snakes from Valiant's shield blinks, and when he tries to investigate further, Valiant arrives and prevents him. However, Merlin leaves the armory without arousing any suspicion, thinking it's just his imagination. He arrives in Arthur's chambers and dresses him up without making any mistakes this time. Arthur praises him, and Merlin ironically admits to enjoying his job at the castle. Arthur leaves for the tournament, and during the day's fighting, Valiant faces a difficult opponent in Knight Ewan, so he resolves to use the shield. He manages to pin him down and commands the snakes to strike Ewan, which paralyzes him. Valiant wins, and Gaius rushes in to help Ewan. He takes him to his chambers to treat him, but gets confused when he discovers it's a snake bite. He tells Merlin about it, and Merlin quickly remembers his encounter at the armory. It then occurs to him that what he saw was real, so he becomes suspicious of Valiant and monitors his every move. He asks Gaius what they are to do, and Gaius says he will need to extract the snake's venom, but will need the snake's head to make an antidote. To be sure whether Valiant is truly using magic, Merlin secretly follows him to his chambers and sees him feed the snakes. Shocked, Merlin makes a racket, which alerts Valiant. So, he quickly runs and hides. Valiant searches everywhere but finds no one, and he goes back inside. Merlin informs Gaius of what he has seen, but Gaius cautions Merlin not to accuse Valiant of cheating until he can prove the allegation. Moreover, the king will never take the word of a servant over that of knights. The tournament progresses, and the final duel is set. Arthur will face Valiant in defense of his title as champion. Valiant and other knights dine with Uther, and the king asks Valiant to stay in Camelot once the tournament is over, and Valiant agrees. While they eat, Merlin quickly seizes the opportunity and sneaks into Valiant's chambers to examine the shield. Somehow, he provokes one of the snakes, and it lashes at him. Merlin manages to cut off its head and returns to Gaius before Valiant returns. Gaius begins preparing the antidote, and Merlin proceeds to inform Arthur. However, Arthur doesn't believe him and views it as a mere hate Merlin has for Valiant. Arthur confirms he doesn't like the guy either, but assures him that Valiant can't use magic in Camelot, as he's aware of the consequences. Somehow, he tends to see some truth in Merlin when he shows him the snake's head. He asks Merlin to swear to him, and Merlin does. Arthur then requests an audience with his father and the royal court, and Valiant is called for questioning. Gaius successfully administers the antidote, and Ewan regains consciousness. He confirms the magical nature of Valiant's shield to Gaius, and Gaius replies that he knows already. Gaius asks him to rest, as he will be needed to testify before the court. When Gaius leaves to get something outside, Ewan is attacked by another of the snakes, and it kills him this time. Speaking before the court, Arthur accuses Valiant of using magic to cheat in the tournament and presents the snake's head as evidence. As expected, Valiant denies the accusation. Uther inspects the shield but finds it harmless. He asks Arthur if he's ever seen Valiant using magic, and Arthur replies that he hasn't, but refers to Merlin as having. Uther is displeased with Arthur for believing in the words of his servant. He asks if there's a suitable witness, and Gaius arrives just at the time to tell them of Ewan's passing. Merlin tries to speak in place of Ewan since he's no more, but Uther orders his arrest. However, Valiant begs Uther not to punish Merlin on his account. The king is pleased by the single act, and he praises Valiant, citing Arthur to emulate him. He asks the guards to release Merlin. Since there's no witness, Arthur recants his accusation against Valiant and apologizes to him. Valiant accepts his apology, but humiliates him by offering him the opportunity to concede the tournament, making everyone to think Arthur's afraid to fight him. Arthur declines the offer and shamefully walks away. In his chambers, Arthur scolds Merlin and accuses him of making a fool of him. He sacks him and asks him to leave his room. Confused about what to do, Merlin visits the cave to see the dragon, who had claimed his destiny lies with Arthur. He complains of his struggles to him, but the dragon tells him that his struggles have just begun, and it flies away, leaving Merlin helpless. That evening, while sitting outside the courtyard, Gwen walks up to him. She asks him if what he said about Valiant is true, and Merlin says yes. Gwen then encourages him to pursue the truth and not to give up. On hearing those words, an idea strikes him. He sees a statue outside the courtyard and asks Gwen to lend him a wheelbarrow, which he uses to carry the statue inside. Sifting through his magic book, he intends to master a spell capable of bringing lifeless objects to life. However, after so many attempts, Merlin finds it hard to master the spell, and he gets frustrated. He goes to see Arthur and tries to convince him not to fight, or Valiant kills him. Arthur insists he can't, as it would mark him as a coward, destroying his ability to lead his soldiers in battle, and paints a bad image of him. Arthur refuses to back down, risking his own life and accepting his fate as a duty of his position as prince. Merlin returns to his room and spends the night practicing the spell till he falls asleep. That night, Morgana has a nightmare where Valiant kills Arthur, and she's scared. In the morning, Valiant sharpens his sword, preparing for the showdown. Morgana enters Arthur's chambers and assists in dressing him, but never tells him of the dream. When Arthur is about to leave, she wishes him luck, and Arthur says to see her at the feast. Arthur makes it to the arena to find Valiant's already waiting for him. The crowd chants their praises and cheers them on. Merlin wakes up and realizes it's daybreak. He decides to try the spell again, and luckily this time, it works for him. He successfully transforms the status into a dog and locks it up in his room. He warns Gaius not to enter his room and runs to the arena. Merlin arrives and finds the fight's already started. Both Arthur and Valiant fight fiercely and end up shedding their helmets to the delight of the crowd. Merlin watches the two clash from afar, and when he sees Valiant about to kill Arthur, he incants the spell he had learnt, invoking the snakes on Valiant's shield. The snakes come to life, and Valiant's secret is exposed. Seeing there's nothing he can do about it, Valiant commands the snakes to kill Arthur. From the grandstands, Morgana throws a sword at Arthur, whose sword had been broken by Valiant. Arthur beheads the snakes and thrusts Valiant through, killing him and retaining his title as reigning champion. At the feast that night after the victory, Morgana teases Arthur about being rescued by a woman, and Arthur arrogantly declares that he needed no help. Arthur then apologizes to Merlin and rehires him as a servant. Merlin is surprised, and Arthur says his armor and stables need cleaning.